Last time we met, we talked a little bit about what this mindfulness is. So I'd like to start there again. Because in some ways, through these four foundations of mindfulness, through noticing the body, sensations of the body, different aspects of being embodied, noticing feeling tones, noticing mind and mind states, and noticing what's called dhammas, we are really cultivating this capacity for ongoing mindful awareness of our moment-to-moment experience. So although what we're paying attention to with these four foundations are important, what's also really important is the cultivation of mindfulness itself. And so last time, we had a little bit of a discussion about what is mindfulness, and I suggested that mindfulness is a knowing that we know. So if you think about an animal, like a dog can be very present. It can be really aware, but most likely a dog is not aware that it's knowing. It doesn't have that same awareness of its moment-to-moment experience. So in some ways, mindfulness is a bit more of a complex mental phenomena where we not only are present to our moment-to-moment experience, but we have a knowing of that particular experience from moment to moment to moment. And that's really important for cultivating insights. Another aspect of mindfulness that's really important is that it's often been talked about as a type of intimacy with our experience. So often we know our experience through concepts and ideas about our experience. So for example, when we hear the sound of a bell, a meditation bell, then right away, just at the beginning of that hearing, the ear connecting with that sound, we may actually just label it, oh, this is a bell sound. And then we don't stay present to the unfolding of that sound of the bell. So this is something really important about mindfulness, that mindfulness is interested in the process and the unfolding of our moment-to-moment experience. So I'd like to do this experiment with us of actually listening to the bell. And what I'm going to invite you to do is to listen to it as if you never heard a bell before. So you may watch how the mind quickly believes that it knows the sound of bell. But if you could bring your mind into a true curiosity where you release any ideas about what a bell might sound like and just receive the sounding of the bell from moment to moment to moment as it's shifting and changing. So we'll try that. I just need to figure out how I turn on the right sound here. That thing is actually not available to me right now. Okay, let's do something else. Bring your attention to the felt sense of your hands resting in your lap or touching each other. And if you can release the idea of hands and even sort of inner images of hands, and simply feel the sensations connected with your hands from moment to moment. So we're moving beyond or beneath the concept of hands, and we are receiving the actual experience of hands. Coolness, pressure, tingling. And then you may notice again that those sensations are not static. They are shifting and changing from moment to moment. Okay. So this is this intimate knowing of our actual moment-to-moment experience that is very different than how we usually attend to our experience. Often we see something, we hear something, we feel something, and right away our mind is now coming up with a concept, a perception, labeling that, saying this is what this is, and then we actually tune out from that experience in that moment, and we're not present to the actual experience as it's shifting and changing. And this type of mindfulness, this type of intimacy is really important for insight. This is why I'm going on about it. It's because it's important that we cannot really understand the true nature of our own heart and mind and body through ideas. We can't think our way through, we can't think our way into knowing, how do I find freedom? It's something we have to see for ourselves. We have to see in our own moment-to-moment experience how stress arises, the causes of that stress, and how we can release that stress. And that's something that's cultivated through this mindful knowing. So as we talked about last time, with mindfulness, often we start with the body as a base camp, as a way that we start to cultivate this mindful awareness, this moment-to-moment knowing of our experience with the body and the body's sensation. And the Buddha put a lot of emphasis on the body. He mentioned it many, many, many times. And actually there are several suttas and several teachings where he says, even if you just stay with the body, you can fully understand how suffering arises, and you can fully release the causes of suffering just by paying attention to your body. So it's really important to start with the body. It can be a really helpful base camp. And part of why it's important is that it's a way that we can also settle the mind. So there's a real connection between the body and the mind. And when we can come into the body and notice patterns of agitation in the body and start to settle some of those patterns, it's a way that we can also settle the mind. So there is this real connection between body and mind. And if you've noticed, when we bring our attention to thoughts, we often get really caught in thoughts. Thoughts are very slippery. There is a time in our practice where noticing thoughts and being able to bring mindfulness to thoughts are really important. But often when we do that, we notice that we get very caught up in the content of the thought. So as we bring this mindfulness to the body, it's a way that we can come into the present moment experience through the body. Just knowing the sensations of the body is a doorway into the here and now, into this moment, what's happening in the here and now. So that's an important way to begin. It's inevitable, even if we continue staying with mindfulness of the body, maybe the sensations of the body, or maybe just knowing the breath patterns in the body, it is inevitable at some point we're going to start to begin to notice what we call feeling tone. The Pali word for feeling tone is vedana. So I'll use both words, vedana and feeling tone. And when we say feeling tone, for a lot of us, we think it's about emotions. And I want to say right away that feeling tone and emotions are not the same, which is often why the word vedana is a little bit more helpful, because for many of us right away we're thinking, okay, feeling tone, that must be something like an emotion, sadness or irritation or grief. But it actually turns out that feeling tone is something that's way more fundamental. It's a way more fundamental building block connected with our experience. So feeling tone arises at every single moment of our experience, ranging from between very pleasant to very unpleasant, and somewhere in between, what we call neutral feeling tone. So it's the hedonic quality that goes along with every single experience. Every single moment of our experience have one of these three qualities connected to them. And they shift and change a lot all the time as well. So we share this, for example, with reptiles, these feeling tones. When I was a young girl, my family had a house in Spain and we used to go there a lot. And I used to watch the little lizards, so they would get cold at night. And then in the morning when the sun came out, you could see them come out and, they would find a warm stone and they would rest there and, get heated up on that warm stone. And most likely it was the sensation of pleasant, it was the feeling tone of pleasant that is guiding that lizard to seek the sunshine. Or if you step right next to a lizard, right, it might run away, so there might be in that moment the arising of unpleasant that then guides that lizard to run away. So you can think about feeling tones as this very basic navigation system that we share, with reptiles as well. Humans have it, and reptiles have it as well. And then emotions are these much more complex states. They're actually considered to be part of the third foundation of mindfulness. They're not part of the second foundation. And so a lot of animals, they have emotions, like a dog would have emotions, a cat probably having emotions. It's a more complex mental phenomena. So in every single moment, there is a feeling tone arising, a vedana arising, that ranges between very unpleasant to very pleasant, and somewhere in between. And the feeling tone arises with any of the 6 sense doors. So the Buddha, from the Buddhist psychology perspective, we have not just 5 sense doors, we have 6 sense doors, because the mind is also considered a door. So as there is a sound connecting with the ear door, in that moment of contact, sound and ear door, there is the arising of a particular feeling tone. So let's say there's a loud, you're sitting in your meditation, there's a loud sound out on the street. The sound is now connecting with the ear door. In that moment, there might be unpleasant vedana arising, unpleasant feeling tone arising at that ear door. Or you taste something for lunch, and in that moment of the tongue door and the food making that contact, there is the arising of, let's say, a pleasant feeling tone. So there is feeling tone with the ear door, with the body door, with the eye door, with the nose door, and also with the mind door. So as a certain emotion or a certain thought makes contact with the mind door, there's also the arising of a feeling tone in that moment. So hopefully this is making sense. So it's basically the sense impressions that are giving rise to these feeling tones. So the feeling tone that arises is really a given. The particular feeling tone that arises is based on all the previous conditions leading up to that particular moment. So as human beings, we may share unpleasant feeling tone connected with certain pain sensations in the body. That might be a shared experience, but most of the feeling tone that arises is based on all our personal conditioning. Things we've learned in our families, experiences we've had in the past, or the cultural conditioning. So whether a particular sight gives rise to pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral is really dependent on all the previous learning we've had leading up to that particular moment. The reason why I'm harping on this a little bit is that it's really important for understanding how suffering arises, why we suffer. So let's say I have a crush on someone, and every time I see this person, I hear this person, I smell this person, there is the arising of pleasant vedana. There's the arising of pleasant feeling tone. If I don't understand that this feeling tone is an aspect of my own mind, what am I going to do? I'm going to assume that that feeling tone is in this other person, and then I'm going to start chasing that other person, trying to get more of this other person, trying to get closer to this other person. That's how a crush happens, right? We automatically believe that the pleasantness that we're experiencing is in that other person. And then they may change. And all of a sudden we have a neutral feeling tone or an unpleasant feeling tone. And now we still think that it's about the other person. We're not realizing that this aspect of feeling tone is in our own minds. It's an aspect of mind. That's why it's important to see the subjective quality of feeling tone. So, most often there's reactive patterns connected with feeling tones. And again, this is a very important teaching of the Buddha. When there is a pleasantness arising at any of the 6 sense doors, most often there is an immediate wanting of that pleasantness. I want more of this. I want to keep this. I want to have this. I want to get this. It's a very almost habitual reaching out for the pleasantness. If there's an unpleasantness arising at any of the 6 sense doors, there's often an immediate, I don't want this. I want to get rid of this. I don't want to have any more of this. I want to move away from this. And with neutral feeling tone, often we tune out. This is not important. I don't need to pay attention here. And then the mind just drifts away. It becomes unaware, not present in that moment. So again, this is important, and one could even think about it as the secret teaching of freedom in the here and now. This particular teaching on feeling tone is the secret teaching of how do we find freedom in the here and now. So although it's very, very habitual, unpleasant, don't want, pleasant, I want to keep, neutral, it's not important, there is actually a gap between feeling tone and the reactivity to feeling tone. When we are mindful, and you may have had this experience, when we are really mindful, we can have, let's say, an unpleasant sensation happening in the body, and we can know it as, okay, this is heat, this is pressure, this is tightness, and this is unpleasant. And it doesn't necessarily lead us into reactive patterns about it. Or we can see a very beautiful sunset. And rather than the mind right away, I want this. Oh, I want to have more sunsets. I want to make sure that I sit out on the balcony every night because these sunsets are so beautiful. I want to line up all the times that I can get more sunsets, or I want to travel to a place where there's beautiful sunsets. That's often how we relate to pleasant. If there's mindfulness in that moment, there can be a knowing of this is pleasant, and there can be an appreciation of the beauty rather than trying to collect it, gather it, hold on to it. So that's why it's a secret teaching of freedom in the here and now. Because this is how the suffering that the Buddha was talking about, this is how suffering arises. It arises out of these reactive patterns that comes from reactivity around the feeling tone at the six sense doors. He had a really great teaching about the arrows. So I imagine some of you have heard that teaching about the arrows. And what he said is that the feeling tone that arises is like the first arrow. That's inevitable, that there's going to be a feeling tone. We can't do anything about that. That's a given for all of us. But the additional arrows that we often shoot is the optional suffering that's on top of that primary arrow. So it's the arrows of, it shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't be feeling pain right now. I shouldn't be having this experience right now. And then it continues on to, maybe I shouldn't meditate. Meditation is not right for me, or I'm a terrible meditator. I'll never get good at this. And then all of a sudden we go from a very basic experience of an unpleasant moment to now we build this whole story of self, this whole story of I'm like this, my world is like this. It's going to be like this forever. I was like this in the past. And this is the creation of suffering. So I just want to say that this is a bit of a complex teaching. So if there's parts of this that doesn't make sense to you, then don't worry about it. You'll hear it many, many times. And again, rather than just trying to get all the words and all the ideas that's being expressed here, really trust your own practice and trust that when you pay attention with this intimacy, with this really coming close to your moment-to-moment experience, then this will start to show on its own. You'll start to see it within your own experience. So vedana is the second foundation of mindfulness. And then mindfulness of mind is the third foundation of mindfulness. And vedana, in some ways, we can think about it as a bridge between the body and the mind. So this hedonic quality of each of our experience, in some ways, then gives rise to the quality of mind. In terms of, if there's already some mindfulness present in the mind, then when there's knowing of a feeling tone, the mind may feel appreciation, it may feel loving kindness, there might be equanimity in the mind in that moment. That's the atmosphere of mind. But if there is not a lot of presence, a lot of mindfulness, then again, the mind may move into more of a reactive pattern with all of this proliferation of thought. As we talked about, I don't want this experience. It shouldn't be like this. The world shouldn't be like this. I have to make sure that I build a life where this is not going to happen anymore. And all of a sudden you have a quality of mind that has a very different flavor. So with mindfulness of mind, we're talking about states of mind, moods that may arise and pass away in the mind. We're talking about thoughts, particular thoughts that may arise in the mind, thinking that arises in the mind. Actually, images is also, inner images are also a type of thinking. And we're talking about emotions as well. Emotions are also considered part of the third foundation of mind. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the sutta about the four foundations of mindfulness, part of the instruction that the Buddha has given around noticing mind is that we notice patterns of the mind being contracted and patterns of the mind being more expanded. So the contracted mind happens when there's this state of discontent, this state of stress, this state of dukkha, the state of suffering, when the mind is in some kind of contracted tangle, not being in harmony with the way things are, but being in a disharmonious relationship with the way things are. And then there's time when the mind is more free of that type of discontentment, when there's more freedom in the mind. And that's part of what we're noticing with mindfulness of the mind. We're noticing patterns of the mind contracting, being more in a discontented place, and the mind expanding and being more in a contented place, and seeing those patterns. So with mindfulness of mind, as we're noticing the moods moving through, as we're noticing thoughts moving through, as we're noticing emotions moving through, we're less interested in the content of the thoughts, in the content of the emotions. And we're more interested in just all of this moving through the mind like weather patterns. Just like there's weather patterns moving through the sky, clouds are forming, rain is arising, snow is arising, sunshine is arising and passing away. That's also how we're practicing with the mind, just seeing all the stuff of the mind moving through like weather patterns, arising and passing away out of certain conditions. And this really gives us another chance to step out of the activity, step out of this unfolding of stress, this unfolding of suffering. If we can step out of the particular story of what's happening in the mind, I'm like this, the world is like this, I want this, I don't want this. And just notice, okay, the mind right now is in a contracted place. The mind right now is in a place of fear. The mind right now is in a place of impatience. That gives us another chance to not add further suffering on top of what's already a difficult moment, by just noticing the quality of mind. And of course, this is not an easy thing for us to do. Because if you've noticed, most of the time we're really identified with what's moving through the mind. the story that's moving through, often we really believe that to a great extent. What the mind is saying, we believe that to be true. So it's not easy for us to step out of that, believing whatever the mind is saying, believing the emotion we're having, believing the stories of the mind, and see it a little bit just like a weather pattern. But this is really a very helpful way for us to step out of the suffering connected with identification, step out of the suffering connected with I am like this and the world is like this, and come into this more moment to moment experience and not adding more layers to something that's already difficult in the here and now. It's like not giving so much authority to the mind as we usually do. It can be helpful, again, from the Buddhist psychology perspective, to think about mind as just another door. If we could observe the mind just like we're observing hearing, or smelling, or seeing, or sensing the body, what if there could be thinking, hearing, sensing, smelling, but there could also just be minding? What does the mind do? The mind is minding. That would really help us to not give it so much authority, and to step out of those patterns that really get us caught, and that really leads to stress and discontentment. So how do we practice this on the cushion and off the cushion? Again, there's a way that grounding in the body continues to be really helpful. Again, it sounds very simple, these instructions, but they're actually quite complicated. And it's very easy for us to get lost in this reactive pattern. So if we can continue to ground in the body, on the cushion and off the cushion, it's an immediate way that we step out of the complexity, out of the reactivity, and just come into a moment that's more simple. Okay, in this moment, I can just notice myself sitting. I can notice myself breathing. I can notice different sensations in the body. It's really a helpful way to come out of complexity when we get really lost in, is it like this? And what should I do with my life? And what's happening in my relationships? What's happening with my work? That we just simplify by just coming into the body, finding a way to reconnect in the present moment through the body door. And then we can begin to notice these hedonic feeling tones. So in this moment right now, as you're sitting here, you may for yourself just notice in the body right now, is there a place where there's some kind of relative pleasantness? It doesn't have to be a loud pleasantness, but just something that's feeling pretty okay. You know, maybe the hands are feeling okay. Maybe the feet are feeling okay. Maybe just the sensation of sitting is feeling okay. And how would you describe this? Is this fairly pleasant? Is it neutral? How is this moment felt in the body in this moment? And then you may notice that there's parts of the body where there might be some unpleasantness. We've already been sitting for a long time. What is it you call unpleasantness? How is that felt in the body right now? So beginning to notice this hedonic feeling tone and seeing if you can, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not about getting the perfect label, but it's about increasing the mindfulness with the feeling tones arising when you hear a sound, when you notice the body, when there's a thought arising in your mind. You can always come back and ask yourself, I wonder what the feeling tone is in this moment. Within that range, how would I describe this feeling tone that's right here in this moment? And just by doing that, you are in some ways coming into that gap between feeling tone and reactivity. Again, as I said, the Buddha taught that there's a momentary freedom that we can experience in that gap. If we can rest in body and we can rest in the feeling tone, okay, this is pleasant, this is unpleasant, this is neutral. There's a way that we, in the here and now, can experience some of the freedom that the Buddha pointed to. And then we can begin to notice this mind door, and we can begin to notice, what's the quality of mind right now? You can ask yourself, does this mind feel relaxed, at ease, contented, or does the mind feel discontented, tight, contracted? What is the quality of mind right now? And again, not to judge it, but just again, the mindfulness has that real curiosity. It doesn't have an opinion about the quality of mind. It's just being very curious about what is the quality of mind right now. Is there a lots of thoughts moving through the mind? Does it have a quality of just like there's this thought production going on? Or maybe the mind is a little drowsy. There's not a lot of activity in the mind right now. Maybe the mind feels more dull, or maybe the mind feels really bright. Just to become curious about the state of mind. Taking your time to come back into a comfortable, still posture. And it's actually helpful to take a little bit of time to move your body, become aware of the space around your body. So to support this capacity to settle. And perhaps before you go into the body, becoming aware of hearing and sounds being known in the space. Letting your hearing be very receptive. Just receiving sounds. Letting them arise and pass away. Remember that same receptive quality, opening to the body and the sensations of the body. Perhaps becoming aware of the boundary of your body, the skin boundary, the temperature of the room touching the skin, the clothing. Now bringing awareness to a part of this experience of body that can support you to settle. Perhaps the sit bones, hands resting in your lap, or breathing. Just trusting that this body knows how to breathe. You don't have to make an effort. But just like you're receiving sounds, you can now receive body breathing. Finding to begin with a very simple focus, something that supports the body and the mind to settle. Now becoming curious if there's any parts of this body that has this pleasant feeling tone. No, it's not going to be static. It may shift and change very fast. Just opening to the body and its sensations, and being curious. Does any part of the body feel more pleasant in this moment? Just a very light inquiry. Still being in this receptive mode, not looking for anything, not making anything happen, but just being curious. What parts of the body may give rise to a sense of pleasantness? Now opening to more of the neutral vedana. Other parts of the body in this moment giving rise to more neutrality, somewhere in between pleasant, unpleasant. It's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And then being curious about areas that you may call unpleasant. It might be an old pain that's getting activated when you practice still meditation. Being curious about the sensations themselves, the experience of unpleasantness. Often we call it pain. And then being interested in the relationship with this unpleasantness. Can you sense into the quality of mind in this moment without judgment, just interest? If there's a quality of disliking, Noticing that state of mind, not liking. Can you release any opinions you have about the unpleasantness, the reaction to it, and bring in this capacity to allow for. Oh, it's like this right now. This is what it feels like when there's knowing unpleasant. There is disliking of unpleasant. It feels like this. Knowing there's always the possibility of skillfully, mindfully shifting your focus. Doing it with intention, with choice, not just blindly, automatically reacting, but becoming aware of this chain of reactivity. Taking a moment, acknowledging it, breathing with it, allowing for it. And then perhaps out of compassion for yourself, kindness, friendliness, shifting your focus to a part of your sense store experiences that's more neutral, perhaps even slightly pleasant. Opening to sounds, feeling your feet, your hands are often more neutral places. Reestablishing your mindful capacity. These last moments, inviting friendliness towards your own experience in this moment. Appreciating yourself for your practice, for taking the time to explore, showing up in person or on the screen. wishing well for yourself, wishing ease, well-being. Now perhaps becoming aware of everybody in the room, those of us joining in on the screen. And if it feels right for you, extending that friendliness to all of us. Perhaps there can be an appreciation of how we support each other's practice. Edmonton Insight Meditation offering this, creating a support for practice. And if it feels available and right for you, extending out that friendliness in all directions. Wishing for ease and well-being for all beings everywhere, in all directions. Thank you for your practice, and I appreciate all of you, and it's such an honor to be here with you. And a special thanks to Edmonton Insight Meditations for offering this. It's quite amazing that you're creating this space for people to come and practice, and then to you, Janet and Tatjana, for holding the space. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you. Take care. Be well.